IELTS Reading Lesson 7, Matching Names. In this type of question, you'll see a list of question statements, the questions, and you'll see a box containing a list of names. And your job is to match the statements with the names. So in other words, for each question, you have to say which person said that statement, or which of the names, it might not be names of people, which of the names matches each statement. Matching names sections can be difficult because the answers are not necessarily in order in the passage. One name may be used for more than one answer. If one name matches more than one of the statements, you can use it several times. And some of the names may not be needed. Some of the names in the box may not be the answer to any of the questions. So what techniques can we use for this kind of question? Well, here's my advice. First, underline keywords in each statement. When I say each statement, I mean the questions. You look at the questions first, not at the names or the passage first. Start with the questions, underline the main words, the meaning words, maybe nouns, verbs, words that later we're going to match with keywords in the passage. Second, scan the passage to find all of the names. You've got a list of names in your box, maybe a list of 5 or 6 names. You can scan quickly through the whole passage to find those names. They should be distinctive. Names can't be changed for any synonyms. You should be able to find them. Most names, of course, will start with a capital letter as well. This should make them easy to find. Highlight each name clearly in the passage. I usually put a circle round the names to make them really clear. And any time a name is repeated, circle it again so that you see all of the places in the passage where those names are mentioned. Then number 3, choose the name with the shortest description. Let me explain what I mean by this. You'll highlight the names in the passage and you'll see that some of them have lots of information about them, maybe a whole paragraph or more than one paragraph of information about that name, about what that person said or thought. But you'll probably see that 1 or 2 of the names only have short descriptions. They don't have much information about them, maybe only 1 or 2 sentences. Start with the shortest description, the name that has the smallest amount of information written about it. Start with that name because that will be easier to read, a short amount of information. And read the sentences around that name, the information about that name in the passage. Underline the main ideas in those sentences that you've read about that name. And then number 4, compare that information with all of the question statements. So we've read about one name that is not mentioned very much in the passage, only a short description, and then we go through all of the question statements, go through them to see if any of them match what you read, and decide on the answer. You might find that one of the question statements matches with that information about that name, or more than one. You might find 2 of them match, or none of them. You might find that none of the question statements match anything that you've read about that name, in which case that name is not the answer for any of the questions. So these techniques might seem a little confusing at the moment, but they should seem a lot clearer when we've done our example questions in this lesson. So we're going to go now to our example test for this particular type of question. If you haven't done so already, now would be a good time to print the worksheet attached next to this video lesson. You could try the full test yourself using the techniques I've just shown you, or you could work through the test with me in the rest of this lesson, or you could do both things. Ideally, do the test yourself, try it, see how you do alone, and then work through it with me on this video. Anyway, let's move on. So the first thing we do is look at the title of the passage. We always do this, and the title is the what and how of happiness. So this topic, this reading, is about happiness. Next, we don't read the full passage, that would waste too much time. We go straight to the questions. Let's look at technique 1 again. We're going to the questions, underline the keywords in each question statement. Here are the question statements. Number 1, and I'll underline some keywords as we go through. Genes play a considerable role in each person's level of happiness. So statement 1 is about the role of genes in happiness. Number 2, the pursuit of happiness requires taking a long-term view of what is good for us. Very different from number 1, that was about genes. Number 2 is about having a long-term view of what's good for us for happiness. Number 3, being unhappy can affect a chemical in the human body, the effect on a chemical. Number 4, we're happy when other people compliment us. Number 5, happiness cannot be achieved without action. And number 6, negative experiences are sometimes valuable because they lead to future happiness. There's a very clear difference between each of those question statements, and we've got some good keywords in there that later we can look at quickly when we're matching with the information that we've read. That's technique 1 then. We've underlined the keywords in each statement. Now we go to number 2. Scan the passage to find all of the names. Highlight each name clearly. For example, put a circle round them. Here are the 5 names that we're looking for, A, B, C, D, E. If we go to the passage now, I'm going to just circle the first example of each of these names where it's mentioned. You would hopefully circle all of the repetitions of every name. Every time a name is mentioned, even if it's repeated, circle it. But I'm just going to show you very quickly the first time that each of these names is mentioned so we can see which paragraph it's in. Well, if we scan through paragraphs 1 and 2, we don't find anything, but then in paragraph 3, we find Aristotle. In paragraph 4, we read about Epicurus, but that's just the beginning. He's mentioned a lot more than that right through the paragraph. In paragraph 6, we have 2 people mentioned, Sonia Lubomirsky and Mark Leary in paragraph 6. Then finally, in paragraph 7, we have these 2 people mentioned together, Andrew Steptoe and Michael Marmot. So we've highlighted all the places that these names appear in the text, and then we can go back to our next technique. Number 3, choose the name with the shortest description, read the sentences around that name, and underline the main ideas relating to that name. Well, when you look at the whole passage and where you've highlighted all the times that these names are mentioned, you should see that the name with the shortest description is Mark Leary. That's the one that is mentioned least, or has the least amount of information, the smallest amount of information about it. So if we start with Mark Leary, we're going to read about him and the information about what he said about happiness and try and match that with one of the statements. So there he is in paragraph 6, and the information about him is just this part. You should see that everything before the lines highlighted in yellow is about different people. We've got Leda Cosmides and John Tooby. That's nothing to do with Mark Leary. So the part about Mark Leary starts with the word according to. Let's look at this part in more detail on its own. According to Mark Leary, as reported in a November 1995 issue of Psychology Today, we are happiest when basking in the acceptance and praise of others. That's the only information we have in the whole passage about Mark Leary. What does it mean then? Well, let's look at the main words in here and just underline a few things. He was reported in the issue of Psychology Today. That's not very important. What's he saying about happiness? We're happiest when basking in the acceptance and praise of others. When others are praising us or accepting us, that's when we're happy. Now, what do we do with that? We do technique 4. Compare that information with all of the question statements, go through them to see if any of them match what we just read. Here we are with the question statements. Was it about the role of genes? No. Number 1, no. 2, taking a long-term view? No. Unhappy and the effect on a chemical? No. Number 4, other people compliment us. We are happy when other people compliment us. Well, that could be the answer. We'll come back to that in a minute. Number 5, happiness cannot be achieved without action. There was nothing about action there. And 6, negative experiences valuable. No. Let's go back to number 4. We're happy when other people compliment us. That matches with praise of others. That is actually the correct answer. It said, Mark Leary was saying that we're happiest when other people are accepting and praising us. So that's the same as when other people compliment us. The answer's D, and we've done, therefore, D, Mark Leary. There was only one piece of information that matched with him, so that's that one done. Let's go next to Sonia Lyubomirsky, because she is not mentioned very much either. There's not much information relating to what she said about happiness. If we go to the passage, we'll see that she's mentioned here in paragraph 6, and this is the part about what she thought about happiness. Let's look at that on its own. Sonia Lyubomirsky concludes in her book The How of Happiness that 50% of a given human's happiness level is genetically determined based on twin studies. 10% is affected by life circumstances and situation, and a remaining 40% of happiness is subject to self-control. So what's Sonia Lyubomirsky saying? Well, she's written this book, and it's saying that 50% of happiness is genetic, and 10% is life circumstances, and 40% self-control. So she's giving these different percentages of what makes happiness. If we look at the question statements, we know that we don't need to worry about number 4. Number 1, genes play a considerable role. Well, if we just go back a moment to what she said, 50% of happiness is genetically determined. Genes play a considerable role. That seems to already be the answer. Let's just quickly check the others. The long-term view in number 2, that was not mentioned. There was nothing about a chemical. There was nothing about cannot be achieved without action, and nothing about negative experiences being valuable. So number 1 looks like the only possible answer for this. We had genes play a considerable role, 50% genetically determined, so that is the answer. That's C. Sonia Lyubomirsky was C, so that was the answer. We've done those two now, and let's move on next to E, Andrew Steptoe and Michael Marmot. Here's what they say in paragraph 7. This is a study by these two people in 2005 found that happiness is clearly related to biological markers that play an important role in health. So happiness, biology and health. Steptoe and Marmot collected health and well-being data from 116 men and 100 women. Interestingly, the participants who rated themselves as least happy had cortisol, a hormone related to stress, levels that were 48% higher than those who rated themselves as the most happy. So what have we got here? The findings, data from some men and women about health. What they found was that the least happy people had higher levels of this hormone, cortisol. If we look at the question statements again, was it number 2, the long-term view? No. Was it number 3, unhappy, affect a chemical? Well, that looks like it should be the right answer. We'll come back to it in a moment. Number 5, cannot be achieved without action? No. And negative experiences are valuable? Number 6, no. So let's go back to number 3, and the matching keywords for this were cortisol 48% higher. Cortisol, a chemical, a hormone, is 48% higher in people who were least happy, unhappy people. So that is the correct answer. That's E for number 3. So now we've done these 3 names and we've got all the information we can. We've only got 2 names left. Let's go for Epicurus next. This is the first half of paragraph 4 because this is a long paragraph. Another Greek philosopher, Epicurus, explained happiness in a different way. Epicurus' ethical theory is hedonistic. Hedonism is the view that pleasure is the only intrinsic good and that pain is the only intrinsic bad. He understands happiness as a more or less continuous experience of pleasure and the freedom from pain and distress. However, it is important to understand that Epicurus does not advocate the pursuit of any and every pleasure. This part of the paragraph is all about his theory that pleasure's good, pain is bad, but he doesn't say you should pursue any and every pleasure. So pleasure and pain really is this part. Let's just quickly check the statements. Taking a long-term view, no, that wasn't mentioned. That it was just pleasure and pain. 5, cannot be achieved without action, no. And 6, negative experiences are sometimes valuable. No, nothing has been mentioned yet that could match with any of our question statements. If we go back then to paragraph 4, the second half, and carry on reading about Epicurus, maybe we'll find something in here. Rather, he recommends a policy whereby pleasures are maximized in the long run. Specifically, Epicurus claims that some pleasures are not worth having because they lead to greater pains, and some pains are worthwhile when they lead to greater pleasures. The best strategy for attaining a maximum amount of pleasure overall is not to seek instant gratification, but to work out a sensible long-term policy. There's a lot of information there. We've got pleasures are maximized in the long run, and at the end, this long-term policy. Also, this mentions some pleasures are not worth having, some pains are worthwhile. There's a lot mentioned in there that we can check in our statements. So, the number 2, taking a long-term view, looks like something that he was saying. So, happiness requires taking a long-term view was the same as a long-term policy, and that's the answer B. Epicurus was B. That definitely matches. And also, if we go on, 5, nothing about action, but number 6, negative experiences are sometimes valuable because they lead to future happiness. Well, Epicurus said some pains are worthwhile. A pain, a negative experience, valuable, worthwhile, some, sometimes, so definitely that matches. And then because they lead to future happiness, lead to greater pleasures. That definitely matches. So that also is answer B, Epicurus. And that answer means that we've done 5 out of the 6 questions, and we're only left with one more question, one more statement, and that's number 5. And we've read about all of the names except for Aristotle, so that must be the answer really. Can you find the keywords in the passage that relate to that, that match with that? That is the correct answer. Of course, that was the only one left. It was the only one that we haven't read all about, and that's the exercise finished. I hope you understood all of that, understood why those are the answers by matching the keywords, looked at the techniques that I was using. If you go back to the original part of this lesson that showed you all the techniques, numbers 1 to 4, and you saw how I used them, I hope that made sense. If anything didn't make sense, go over it again and think about it, watch the video again and look at the worksheet carefully. Let's just finish as usual with a keyword table just to highlight the vocabulary. Of course, you would never do this in an exam, you haven't got time, but when practicing at home it's a very good idea to keep tables of vocabulary It helps your language as well as your reading technique, your exam technique for this part of the test. Here are the words that I would put in my keyword table from this exercise. We had genes play a role, 50% genetically determined. Taking a long-term view, work out a long-term policy. Being unhappy can affect a chemical, cortisol levels 48% higher. People compliment us, praise of others. Cannot be achieved without action, requires activity or action. That was the one for Aristotle. I hope you found that. Negative experiences sometimes valuable, some pains are worthwhile, and lead to future happiness, lead to greater pleasures. That's our keyword table finished. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. In the next lesson, I'll look at two types of question quickly. We'll look at short answer questions and matching sentence endings.